Hello, everyone. This is Braswell Dean from Providence Family Medicine, and I wanted to welcome everyone to your internship. I titled this talk, Climbing Medicine, The Journey of Your Lifetime. And I'm very honored to be able to give you a talk like this, and I hope it helps you in some way to make your intern year really successful. Our table of contents today, we're going to do a quick overview of residency, sort of talk about some talking points about your new world and things that will make it more successful, some perceptions that you might have, and problems that I think you will need to look at in terms of organization, communication, feedback, and knowledge. These are things that are really key problems to solve along the way. After that, we'll meet a hypothetical new class and you get to pretend you're the attending. We'll have a quick time of reflection and maybe some wisdom and advice for you. So that's what we're doing, but I wanted to start off today with a quote from Sir William Osler. To each one of you, the practice of medicine will be very much as you make it. To one, a worry, a care, a perpetual annoyance. To another, a daily joy and a life of much happiness and usefulness. But whatever you do, take neither yourselves nor your fellow creatures too seriously. There is tragedy enough in our daily routine. Faithfulness in the day of small things will insensibly widen your powers, correct your faculties, and in moments of despondency, comfort may be derived from a knowledge that some of the best work of the profession has come from those whose clinical field was limited but well tilled. What's he saying? He's saying medicine is what you make it. And don't take yourselves too seriously, whatever you do, because medicine is a big ocean and a lot of times we're like little boats. And if you can be faithful in the small things of the day and worry about those and don't get too worried about all of the things of the day, you may find that you've done your best. And one thing I loved is his point that you don't have, sometimes when you're feeling down, you don't have to be the smartest person in the room to do the most good for the patient. Some of the best work in medicine has come from the people who've tilled their soil well. Words to the wise. So probably what you're doing is you're sitting to yourself saying, well, man, I'm finally here. How do I succeed? What do I have to do? How are things going to work here? How long do I have to be here before I feel relevant? How do I compare with everybody else? Oh, they look better than me. Or, man, I think I got them. It's like there's so many expectations. And I'm sure that you have had everyone come up to you and wish you congratulations and welcome. And that's what I'm doing too. But I want to get under the hood just a little bit and help you try to understand this new world you're in. And maybe you can help smooth out some of the rough edges. Now, to do this, I want to give you 60 seconds of what your life is going to be like in the next 3 years. Okay? So let's do residency in 60 seconds. Right here is where you are right now. 3 years from now, this is where you'll be. This right here, right now, everybody's happy and excited. Hip, hip, hooray. I'm a doctor. You're excited, but a little bit tense. And you're going to be on this roller coaster ride until about halfway through. You're going to be on this roller coaster ride till maybe around December, January, something like this. And then midway through the residency, it's kind of like reality setting in. And You know, you've done all the welcome orientation stuff, but now reality's in. Your name's at the bottom of the page. You're responsible. You've just had your in-service exam, and man, that was humbling. And then you start worrying, like, man, am I learning anything? You kind of, it creeps inside your head. It gets in there. You got to have a pep talk. You need a pep talk from your mom, your dad, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your husband, your wife. And the evaluation process begins to feel more and more stressful. Like, God, I wish they'd just, tell me something good. And then, boom, something happens. It's called second year. And all of a sudden, you are in control. Like, say what? You're now training interns, and they feel so slow. They are so dense. How does anybody talk to them? They're hard to watch. And you get so frustrated. Like, are you kidding me? I've got to watch them do my job. And then you start realizing you know a lot more than they do. And you know a lot. And then midway through your second year, you feel like your class has the power. Everyone starts looking to you more and more because your clinical judgment now is becoming more and more trusted. You're co-chief, and you're running the inpatient service pretty well. And you walk around like you own the place. Everybody knows your name because you've been in the foxhole for a whole year. The nurses all know you. You sort of have the command of the floor. And then something happens. Pow. Third year. And we'll call this the blur. You know what you've done, even if nobody else appreciates it. You've got opinions that matter. But this joy begins to fade as you realize you've got research to present, you've got job interviews to do, recruiters to call, you've got graduation requirements to meet, and golly, I've got to take boards. And then you're going to turn around and you're going to graduate. And it's going to be the fastest year of all. Boom, we'll call it the blur. All right, well, there's your residency. Party's over. But let's slow down. Here we are back to day one, orientation. Life is good. You're not going to find anybody today that's not smiling. People are coming up saying welcome and congratulations all the time. Super duper. But if you could understand one thing, this whole process of orientation and getting your feet wet and giving you, this journey, it's not about who you are right now. It's about the future you. It's about what we see in you. It's about the potential that we see in you as a future doctor. That's what the excitement is. That's the buzz. That's what the faculty get so excited about. It's the future you. Now, let's look at the disconnect. Remember I said that the roller coaster starts setting in, and then midway through, residents are starting to have things creep in their minds. These are the kind of things that they say. Residents will feel like, I'm not smart enough. I'm not learning anything. Everything seems so disorganized. And believe me, hospital environments are. Everything thrown at you at once. The evaluations, though, are unfair. I feel misunderstood. Nobody really understands me. Or you may have stress at home that nobody even understands or is aware of. There's not enough time to do my job. I'm very underappreciated. And I just can't please that person. That attending's got it for me. Or I can't stand when I have to present to that person. Or that chief is driving me nuts. Or that co-chief, I can't get along with that person. Or that other resident. Or that nurse. You've got to hear me tell you about that nurse. Or that guy down in the ER. You just can't please him. Or maybe I feel somebody's biased against me in some way. That stuff runs through everybody's mind. Now, at the same time, the attendings, on the other hand, and I've heard a lot of attendings talk too. They'll say, oh, that resident is trying too hard, or maybe they're not trying hard enough. or they just look distracted, or they're worrying too much. They're worrying because they're worrying, and that makes them worry. Or they just get disorganized. Or they're not used to feedback. Maybe they're smart, but they're just not used to it. Or maybe there's some barriers to them being evaluated. Or some are just totally mishandling the stress. They're mishandling it in very unhealthy ways, because stress can be used for good. It motivates you, but they can mishandle it. And sometimes the attendings will say, that resident just needs to get used to the water a little bit more. They just need to be on the floor a little bit more, or get used to this environment. I mean, some residents have never done anything other than go to college and medical school. Some others have worked. But sometimes a person's personal growth requires them just to get used to things a little bit more. Sometimes the attendings think, that resident really wasn't truthful to me, and that's a bad thing. And sometimes the attending might say, that resident's time management needs to really improve. We're going to be here all night. Or that resident complains too much. Or that resident gets defensive when we try to reach out to them, or when we try to teach them. So we can see that there can be a real disconnect between what the resident feels and what the attendings feel. I found it really interesting that a study from 2009 showed, when it was looking at about 2,000 medical students, that a good percentage of medical students and residents had manifestations of either minor or major depression. So it's really a real thing. And we know and we understand that medicine is a very stressful environment. We are well aware of that, and we want you guys to do well. One of the things I really like this saying is that life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you respond to it. It really is true. I want to look at 4 problems you need to solve in order for you to have an exciting, successful, and fun residency. Is that possible? That's a question a lot of people are asking. Well, number 1 is getting organized. Number 2 is communication skills. Number 3 is feedback and evaluations, knowing what that means. And number 4 is knowledge base. Let's look at these real quick. Getting organized is learning how the mind of a doctor works. And this cannot be read from a book or discerned from observation or taught in a lecture. It must be lived out. I put descended. That's kind of funny too. But it's got to be lived out. It takes work, and it takes some soap. So we're going to show you. We're going to break this down in a minute and unpack all this for you. The second thing is communication skills. Thinking about stuff is one thing, but speaking to your colleagues or your patients is another thing altogether. Totally different animal. Totally different set of skills you got to learn. The third thing, feedback and evaluations. And one thing's clear. Feedback looks at what's under the radar, under the roof, under the hood. What's in your wallet? It's what's inside. And it tries to get at it. And it tries to let you see it through lots of paperwork and tons of evaluation forms and progress milestones. But remember what I told you earlier. Keep feedback in perspective. It's the process of looking at the future you. That's why we're all here. We're all here as your cheerleaders. This is not a residency that tries to pimp you and bring you down. This is a residency that tries to lift you up. It's the future you we're looking at. Number four is knowledge. And I put that on the last. It's the last thing for a reason. Why? Because it's paradoxical, but it's true. It's the least important thing. Knowledge requires a lot of experience. but knowledge also requires you to be thirsty for it. If knowledge is anything valuable, you got to give it away. You got to share it with somebody. And you got to make it fun. You got to figure out how to make chronic kidney disease fun. Knowledge is a lifelong pursuit. You're not going to learn everything you need to know in 3 years, or everything you want to know, or everything you desire to know. So put that anxiety aside. Remember what Sir William Osler said. You don't have to be the smartest dude in the room, the smartest person in the room. You just have to have you just have to be the person with the best kept soil, the hardest worker. Let's look at these things and unpack them. Getting organized. There's a bunch of medical paperwork, so get used to being swamped by mountains of never-ending paperwork. It's the unglamorous side of all this. So we can be organized with our paperwork, and you've got to be, don't get me wrong, but you've also got to be organized in your medical thinking. And the medical thinking is SOAP. It's one of the big tools in your toolbox. And you all know it, subjective, objective, assessment, and plan. You guys are pros at writing H&Ps, right? You got to get used to talking to lots and lots of people and asking lots and lots of questions and hearing lots and lots of answers. And if you have the SOAP format, you know where all those questions are, and you know where to put all those answers. And I will tell you right here, right now, mark my words, not every one of you here will learn how to use the SOAP format. Some of you will never be comfortable, and you won't be able to train your mind to put things in this format. Or some of you may, and then you get out in private practice, and then you won't use it. Some of you will. And those of you who will use this format will always appear more organized and make fewer mistakes. And those of you who says, you know what, SOAP doesn't work for me, more than likely, you don't have the skills yet developed to use it fast. Because you can use SOAP fast in less than 60 seconds. But that takes a long time of practice. I challenge you, getting organized in your mind is so important. So the subjective, objective, assessment, and plan, it's how people see you, but it's how you take in information also from the patient. Let's take a hypothetical here. A resident is coming in to present. A 55-year-old female with a history of diabetes, hypertension, CVA, PTC, PCTA, MI times 2, CHF, mild cognitive impairment. And as the resident's saying all this, the resident's probably thinking, man, I bet I sound really organized. Okay? But at the same time, the attending's saying, when are you going to tell me what I need to concentrate on? Like, why is the patient here? You know? So in the resident's mind, the resident continues, who presents with shortness of breath. Okay? That's why they're here. The attending's thinking, well, that took enough time, and it's really hard to concentrate on all these random diseases if you don't have the context of why they're even here in the office or why they're even here coming into the hospital. What brings you in? Oh, but I just want to give you all this to set the stage for the chief complaint. Well, if you're an attending like some of us, we're wondering, is this all of past medical history, or is there more that you just haven't given me that I'm going to have to double back on? Because I can't afford to miss anything. And yes, I am skilled enough to be able to put it in context if you just tell me what's wrong. So now the resident continues. Oh, let's see. She's had a cough now. It's worse. The lungs sound bad, and I'd like to cover for pneumonia. Okay, so a little bit of HPI, a little bit of exam, and we go straight to the plan. It's always interesting for me. Most of the time, The one section that the resident will leave off is the assessment because they're anxious. This is what makes people have anxiety. This is where you have to think about it and distill it and come up with a differential diagnosis and then sort of sort that out by relevance. And then there's so much anxiety over the plan. I just need to know what to order. It's driving me nuts. Let's just get to it. Then we can talk about the differential later. That's one of the disadvantages sometimes with EMR systems is there's so much anxiety about how you order stuff, you forget about a good assessment. Well, in any event, the attending asks, what about past medical history and the medicines, the allergies, and the ROS, and the family social history? And he's thinking, the attending, he or she is probably thinking, man, I hope the resident can learn to think in SOAP format and try to be structured. Now at this, the resident's going, well, why are they asking about past medical history again? He or she obviously wasn't listening to me. Okay, we'll go back. Other past medical history, PE, interstitial pulmonary fibrosis, lupus, and obstructive sleep apnea. Well, there you go. Thank you very much. The attending thinks, well, I hope we don't miss anything because I had to go back and ask past medical history because they didn't give it to me to start with. Let's slow down and think about the differential because now I'm a little uneasy with this resident because they're just all over the place. And the resident's thinking, man, I hope they think I'm good. And you can see the disconnect. And it starts in this particular case with the way the resident is thinking and presenting those thoughts. So I challenge you for a minute, and these are observations that I've made, just my observations for the around 25 years or so of people thinking. How do residents think? What is the process? And I would boil it down to three main things: data accumulation, data processing, and data communication. Data accumulation is you running all over the hospital, asking a bunch of questions, getting a database, and some of you are faster than others, but you just get a whole bunch of information. The second thing is data process. Now that you've got all this information, what do you do with it? This is where you put it all in that big brain of yours, you run through a differential, you decide what the common things are, what makes medical sense, what makes common sense, and the most likely things that are going on. What's your big list? And then the light bulbs go off. What's your assessment? What do you think we need to do? The third big thing is data communication. This is where you present. This is where you communicate with your chief or your co-chief or your attending or your senior or somebody else, or even presenting or talking with a patient or a nurse. But how you hand off, I can't overemphasize the presentation skills. If you keep it in a SOAP format here, and you keep this in a SOAP format here, you're going to be presenting more in a SOAP format here. You'll be more organized. But I will tell you that grand rounds presentation is different than inpatient presentations of a physical exam, and that's different than an office encounter, and that's different than rounds report, and that's different than sign out. They're all different skills for you to learn. But if you keep it SOAP, then you know where to put chief complaint. You know where to put history present illness and ROS and past medical history and medicines and allergies and family social history, because the patient sometimes doesn't read the book. They throw it all at you all at once, and you've got to sort of know where it goes in your mind. And once it's there, it's so much easier to present it back to somebody else. Keep it SOAP if you can. It's a learned skill. Next, communication skills. The second thing the problem you want to address. And you're going to be somebody who has a lot to say. You're going to be doing a lot of your day talking. But remember the listener. And be aware, you might not sound as clear as you think you do. And as we just got through saying, grand rounds When you're presenting there, you make them guess in SOAP. A morning case is sort of making them guess in a teaching format. And presenting a physical, you don't want to present a physical to your attending to make them guess, but many residents have done that. They feel like they're presenting case of the week. You know, it's 12:30 at night, and you're talking with somebody on the phone, and it's case of the week. That's not that's not the right way. It needs to be efficient. Office encounters are briefer as well, but they're still in SOAP. When you're signing out, it's still in SOAP, but we distilled it down to just to assessment and plan. But it's within the context of a SOAP format. And when you're talking with patients and staff, you don't want to go in there talking SOAP, but you want to communicate in the art of medicine. That's a whole different thing. So in other words, if you can talk like you would to your mom or your dad or a brother or a sister or a husband or a wife or a fiance, if you can talk just like family, you don't have to impress anybody and use big words. You don't have to say ventricle or ejection fraction this. The temptation is going to be there to try to impress the patient because as an intern, you're young in your career and you want to feel like you can prove yourself a little bit. Come down to their level, though. Speak like a person and break that failure down, heart failure down, and maybe a kitchen sink is plugged up or the engine in the truck needs a tune-up. Break it down for something that somebody can understand and hold on to. Whole nother communication skill. The art of medicine is talking like a person and not like a doctor. I want to take another 2 minutes and go over maybe something that gets people in trouble, and that is where patient handoffs occur. Mistakes happen there most often. These a few slides are from slides I gave at an AAFP convention one year, the wake-up call. The potential breakdown in communications during patient handover. Another name for handover is like sign out, or when you're leaving the hospital and you're signing out to one another, or your chief signs out to you and now you're on call. Breakdown in communication during this is a serious issue affecting our hospital and our doctors and patients. And believe me, we're all very well aware that you guys are new interns, and turning you loose in the hospital, we want to make sure the chiefs and the co-chiefs are shepherding you in the right way. And when information is given to you, we want to make sure it's given to you in a standardized way, in a practical way, so that you're not set up for failure. And we want to train you how to do it too. Some research from the United Kingdom showed that they studied physicians at various stages of their training, and they found that the newer doctors were very unprepared for the handoff. And others viewed handoffs as poor. And one thing that came about is that professional attitudes are essential. In other words, when somebody's handing off to you or signing off information to you, we know that that's a vulnerable time. Information can get miscommunicated or dropped, and you can make wrong decisions. So whoever's signing off to you should be professional, non-distracted, not watching the football game out of one eye, or having dinner. Oh, yeah, this is pretty good. You'll know what to do. Okay, let's go to the next one. I got to go home pretty soon. It needs to be, you need to have a professional attitude for the giver of the information as well as the receiver. It's not merely a communication task, but a clinical skill. You're going to learn it, and you'll get better and better at it. You may be slow to start, and we know that too. But a good handoff requires your diagnostic, your clinical, and decision-making abilities, and that grows with time. So don't worry if your handoffs aren't as good as your seniors want it to be. We know that. And another thing that affects handoff is a trust or lack of trust. Okay? It drives resident behavior. If you trust the person giving you a good handoff, and then that patient starts getting short of breath, you're going to do what they told you to do. But a lot of times, the worst scenario is when you don't trust what somebody told you to do. That really can leave you vulnerable to, in the middle of the night, something happening. Horwitz, among others, did some research. They did sign-outs among U.S. internal medicine house staff, and they found that 2/3 of the time, key clinical information was available either in written or oral sign-outs. Okay? Only 2/3 of the time. Another third of the time, it wasn't available. And they found a need to standardize key content in some type of template form. One of the things that we all agree is that it is a vulnerable time in patient care. So that morning sign-in that you're going to have on your inpatient team is there for a reason. The attending is there for a reason. And the time is structured for a reason. The noon sign-out and the afternoon sign-out are there to keep medical errors low. That's why. And there has to be standardization in ways we do it. So you'll find out we have ways of doing that too. Now, the limits on the duty hours has led to more turnover, like more people going home, and that leads to more and more handovers. And more handovers, more handoffs are where mistakes happen. And so this is rarely taught to junior doctors, but we try to make a point of teaching. Now, when you look at handoffs, you can have cold handoffs and hot handoffs, okay? The red is hot, this is cold. Cold means there's no interaction. You know, you just get a paper or a tape or a videotape, and you don't have the ability to ask questions. And the more ability you have to ask questions and interact with the person giving you the information, the better the handoff. The best handoff is face-to-face, either with a whiteboard or with paper. That's why we have face-to-face handoffs with paper and in person. So we resist the temptation just to do a phone or, leave a list. And if somebody says, we don't need to really hand off, I've just left the list up there in the call room, just go over there and you can see the patients. That is a terrible way to have a handoff. That's cold handoff. So don't get stuck there. You deserve to have a face-to-face handoff. Okay, mistakes happen. And the hospital is always tracking clinical events, mistakes, near misses, length of stay, infection rates. Okay? They're usually the result of communication breakdown or the doctor fails to grasp the clinical situation. And we call this situational awareness. Just be aware that we are aware of these mistakes. They're important. I'll change subjects here and we'll shift to a tale of two interns. Intern A feels like she's got a lot to learn. Many others in her class seem to know a lot more than she does, but she's humble, and her humility causes her to double-check things and read all she can. She tries to be 5 minutes ahead of time for all planned events, and she tries to present in SOAP, making her presentations easier to understand. And her evaluations are almost always superior because people understand her. They like working with her. So the moral of the story from Intern A is you're going to get more good evaluations when you communicate well. Intern B scored high on all his testing. He's super smart, but he's usually late, and he rambles through his presentations. His evaluations, his evaluations usually reflect his disorganization. instead of his other talents. And this frustrates him. So as a result, he's defensive and he worries a lot. This is intern B. The moral of his story is evaluations are marginal when you appear disorganized and you don't communicate well. So what are your deliverables? Remember, as Sir William Osler said, you don't have to be the smartest person to be what the patient needs, just the most well-tilled. Your deliverables are your attitude and a bit of soap. Your attitude is, if you have a humble attitude and a sincere attitude, that's the key. That's the key to everybody's heart. The attending's heart, your patient's heart, colleagues, and soap. That's how you receive the data and communicate the data to others. It's the roadmap of the connections inside your brain that's relevant to everybody. So if you worry all the time about being right, it's only going to help you less than half the time. I promise. It's not about trying to win the argument of what, this paper says we ought to do it this way, and I pull the paper and I'm right. Never gets you that far. Being humble and sincere will help you about 95% of the time. It's the only thing under your control. I promise. And if you're organized and clear, it'll help you 100% of the time. This is how people view you. Those are your deliverables. Let's talk about feedback next. The third big problem. What is feedback? Well, feedback is something you get from somebody. This is a healthy feedback loop. It requires you to reflect on it, take some action on it, make some improvement, and then people start seeing your performance differently, and they'll give you new feedback. And then you'll do the whole thing again, and they'll give you more feedback. In other words, feedback is a cycle that goes over and over and over and over. It's never stationary. In other words, it's a continuous cycle. And after a lot of years of listening to feedback, giving feedback, and seeing residents just not feeling comfortable with the feedback or being afraid of the feedback or freaking out, if I could distill it down to one thing, I was trying to think about this. I would say it's not about you. It's about the future you. This is what makes our faculty click and tick. It's about inspiring you to be the best you can be, the future you. We're not a faculty that tries to bring you down. We're a faculty that tries to build you up. And when you get feedback from faculty, it's all designed to improve who you are for the future. Now, you got to keep it in perspective. Here's advice. And keep it positive, no matter if it feels negative. I know that's easy to say. It's harder to live. But remember, if the feedback seems negative to you, remember middle school algebra, a negative times a negative is a positive. Or maybe this elementary school now, who knows? But a bunch of negatives make positives. And a whole bunch of negative things gives you the opportunity to say, wow, look at all this negative feedback. I can take it all and turn it into positive action because I know exactly what not to do. It's all in your attitude. Turn to the feedback, not away from it. Don't run from feedback. And keep this feedback loop always spinning. Remember, it's professional, it's never personal. And don't let feedback freak you out or shut you down. I've seen so many super smart people, super good people, super strong people just worry so much they just completely shut down. Now, let's change subjects for a minute. I want you to pretend you are a faculty and we're welcoming in this new class. Chuck Suave, Vinny Perfecto, and Wendy Warrior. They've had orientation, they've had our welcome breakfast, and they're all working hard as interns. Now, it's time for us to think a little bit about how to give them feedback. So let's meet them and review their progress. So let's meet Chuck Suave. He looks cool and he feels cool. He's done multiple outside rotations and is considering a fellowship after residency. Chuck feels offended whenever we try to help him. He loves hanging out in the ER with his buddies. He practices intubation and likes to debate treatment plans with his attendings. Meet Chuck. When we look at Chuck's skill sets, he comes across pretty well. But he scores really low on a few things. He's got a bunch of incomplete rotation evaluations, and he comes across disorganized in the way he presents. How would you talk to a guy like this? Is he going to bite your head off? Are you going to cause him to have a bad day? And it's your job to give him this advice, because if we don't, he might not graduate, number one, but he'll never be the Chuck Suave that we know he could be. Let's meet Vinny Perfecto. Well, Vinny is popular. He's never on time. He's always on his phone. His presentations can be scattered, but he loves being here, folks. He never has any time to read. He likes to outline all his computer orders before he sees the patients. He hates it when patients talk too fast, but hey, his patients love him. Welcome, Vinny. So, Vinny's skills are really good, but Vinny comes across deficient in his time management. He spends forever in the rooms. He spends forever trying to sign out. Nobody likes to get sign out from Vinny. How do we help Vinny? Vinny feels like he's being thorough, or is he just anxious because he's never reading? We don't know. We're trying to figure out why he's so anxious about outlining all his computer orders too. He wants everybody to slow down, but he's even slower. Time management is something we've got to work on, but how do we tell Vinny without hurting his feelings? Let's meet our third resident. Meet Wendy Warrior. Wendy gets the job done, so get out of her way. To her, time is myocardium. She can't understand why seniors don't give her more leadership responsibilities. Wendy plans to become medical director of her own healthcare system. She really gets quiet when feedback is given, so let's keep it all inside and avoid the confrontation. Welcome, Wendy. When we look at Wendy's skill sets, she always scores great, but she scores low in certain other areas because she seems to be always around where arguments are occurring. There's a lot of team friction around Wendy. And when we try to talk with Wendy about it, she feels we're being unfair to her, and we really don't understand. How do you talk to somebody like this? Well, welcome to our job. Some medical wisdom for you is feedback is hard to receive sometimes. Feedback is just as hard to give sometimes too. But without the feedback, no one ever grows in any meaningful way. So remember, feedback is about the future you. It's not about who you are. And we've got to give you guys lots of feedback. So let me challenge you. What kind of mind do you have? Do you have this, fixed mindset, or do you have this growth mindset? Because receiving feedback is all about your mindset. Okay? The fixed mindset says, you know what? I'm either good at it or I'm not. I want to be good. And if you're not telling me I'm good, you're really telling me I'm bad. And I don't want to fail. And I feel like this evaluation is really telling me you're failing me. I need you to tell me I'm smart because I don't want you to tell me I'm improving. That's the last thing I want. I am going to do this on my own. And, you know, if I'm smart, I'm just going to have to read more papers and do it. You know, and if people around me are getting better evaluations, you know, it's just making me more and more anxious. And one of the words of wisdom I'd give you, if you feel like you're a little concrete or fixed in your mindset, if you're competing with yourself in your own mind with a fixed mindset, you're going to lose 100% of the time because you're competing with yourself. You'll win, but you'll lose. What about the growth mindset? This person says, I can learn anything I want to. There's no limit. But I'm not worried about failure. It's like a tennis player not worrying about hitting practice serves in the net. I've got to hit a lot more in the net until I can learn how to really serve. Tell me I try hard. You don't have to tell me I'm smart. I just want to hear that you think I'm trying hard because that's something I can control. And I know that my effort and attitude determine everything. I'm not worried about whether you think I can, sew an interrupted suture, or whether you think I can read an EKG right now really good, or talk about antibiotic coverage. I admit it. But if those around me are doing it, I feel like I can do it too. One of the things I'll tell you is that when you learn that you can learn whatever you want to learn, guess what? You just learned how to learn. Because now you're learning without limits. So I challenge you to have a mindset that allows growth, not defensive or limited or fixed. The fourth thing is kind of at the very last. Boo-hoo, knowledge base. Everybody puts this number 1, but I put it number 4. It's important, but it's not the most important. And let me give you some advice. Stay humble in your quest for knowledge. Don't be afraid to ask questions. There will always be times when you don't know what to do or when you have a question. Ask questions. But relax. Even though you feel like you don't know what to do, there's always help. We build that into your residency. Remember also, don't over-relax, because reading and study is your responsibility. The attendings can't read for you. If you want to feel smart, read. But remember, you eat an elephant one bite at a time. Get a medical textbook and read the treatment sections, and you'll feel smarter quicker, right? You don't have to read the whole 25 pages on congestive heart failure. You just read 1 page on the treatment or the 2 pages on the treatment. Boom! Now you're asking super duper questions at morning sign out, or you're asking attendings, or you're asking the consultants, hey, you know what? What do you feel about this, this, and this? Because you read the treatment sections. How many times do you have to read that treatment section? Probably 20 or 30 times over and over and over and over until you begin to feel like those medicines start making sense because now you're ordering them in the hospital or in the office. The knowledge comes. I would also tell you, do the ABFM question sets regularly. I know you're first year, but if you do those ABFM questions little bit by little bit, maybe 10 questions every week or 20 questions a week, outline them or look them up, write them down, keep them in a database, a searchable database like Evernote or something like that. Wow. By the time you're a third year, you're not going to have a lot of board anxiety. And remember, the ABFM writes the test. You might as well study their questions. Because when you study their questions, things look familiar to you. Study efficiently. Now, here's some golden rules I'm passing on to you about knowledge. And notice that none of this really deals with Harrison's textbook of medicine or anything else. But it just goes to show you that you can be smart in different ways. Picture smart, self smart, nature smart, logic smart, word smart, people smart, body smart, music smart. There's so many different ways to be smart. And I love that because back in Georgia, we would say that person has people smarts. Or visual smarts. I would say a lot of you are visual learners. You might not be able to understand a single thing that you just read, but if you see a picture of it, you'll understand it more. And if you are on call one night and you're dealing with it in life, that's a whole different way to learn. So don't measure your scores by your board scores. I've seen a lot of residents get down in the dumps because of a board score or the in-service exam or a medical milestone or various committee evaluations. Don't let this process define you or get under your skin. The evaluation is a professional process. It's got to occur to make you that person of the future that you need to be. Remember, some golden rules. Attitude is the only thing under your total control. Number 2, don't let others control your joy. Keep that inside. 1 minute, you're going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread, and in another minute, a patient's going to think you don't know anything, and you're crushed. Don't let that happen. Keep control of your own joy. Number 3, be humble. Touch the patient. Now, with COVID, we're not doing as much shaking hands, but if you have a pair of gloves on, you can. But slow down. Maybe sit down. And touch the patient in so many different ways. It might not be with your hand, it might be with your heart. Let them know you care. You might not know everything, but let them know you care. Number 4, talk like your mom and your dad. Talk like you're talking to family. Don't talk like a doctor. I've seen so many people roll their eyes when somebody's in there talking like a doctor. And I'm not just saying interns. It could be chiefs, co-chiefs, or attendings too. Talk like a person. You'll get down on their level, and that patient will trust you so much. And call people by their first names. Don't go in there and say, Ms. Jones. That distances people. Call that person by their first name, or ask permission to. You're dealing with people who are ill at vulnerable times in their life. You got to get on their team. You don't get on their team by calling them by their last name. Be aware of the cultural things and be respectful, but try as best you can to let them know how much you care. Now, the 5th one is you got to understand that as faculty, we appreciate you for who you are. We want to make you your very best. It's not you versus us. It's really not. And you may feel it, but it's not. We want to make you the best. So, you've got a lot to offer, and don't get hung up on just one part. Don't get hung up on board scores, because we see all of these things in you. And we want you to use them to be a doctor as well. Okay? So, a couple of little reflection points here for you, and then we're wrapping up. I just found some quotes that seem like they make good sense. Kindness is the highest form of intelligence. Be kind to one another. Be kind to your patients, and be kind when you come home to your husband or your wife or your mom or your dad or whoever you're coming home to. Or it's not you're not going to come across very smart if you're not a kind person. Knowledge is having the right answer, but intelligence is asking the right question. So ask questions and be humble. You come across smarter anyway at the end of the day. And it's not about having the right answer, that's for sure. Because I would say 50% of the time when I drive home, I'm thinking, did I do the right thing about that person, or how could I do better? You know? And I'd love it if somebody gives me insight. That's intelligence. Emotional intelligence is a sort of another thing. And I just thought it made sense. We're used to thinking of intelligence as book learning. But having self-awareness, being aware of your limitations at what you can and can't do, or asking for help, being aware if you're shutting down. You know, I've seen so many residents come through and not be even self-aware, to the point where it's almost like you have to draw their life on the board. Be aware of what motivates you. Are you motivated because you want to study for boards, or are you motivated because you just want to be a good doctor? Are you motivated maybe because your father's a doctor or somebody you're trying to impress? Hopefully you're not motivated just by financial rewards, but I've seen that too. Know what motivates you, and it might be something higher than medicine is. It might be your faith. It might be your marriage. It might be your children or your wife. That motivates you too. Let that all be part of your package. What kind of social skills do you have? Now, many of you may think you're the greatest thing, and then you spend a month dealing with a nursing station, and all of a sudden you're like Jell-O. And whatever skills you think you have, somebody says your skills are jack, nothing, okay, until you've come here. And it's all like, well, okay, I thought I had skills, but I don't. So be aware that you may think you've got more skills than you do. Or the skills that you do are there, but they've got to change. They've got to grow. Empathy. If you can't empathize with people who are ill, spend some time there. Now, it's true. Some of the residents have never been ill. Some of you have. But it's difficult sometimes when you're dealing with life and death. And we want to prepare you that you will be dealing with death. And you can internalize that and keep it as guilt, and it can manifest in a whole lot of ways. Your job is not to sympathize and internalize all of these illnesses, but don't turn it into a cold shoulder too. Because a doctor who can empathize is beloved by a family. Remember that. Self-regulation. What does that mean? It's discipline. I want to watch TV. I want to play Minecraft. I don't know if you guys play Minecraft. My daughter does, but I want to play video games. Well, maybe I need to discipline myself and give myself 30 minutes to go over some board questions at night, or on this night one a week, or I need to read, or I need to go to sleep, because if I don't, I'm not worth anything tomorrow. A lot of things keep your boat floating. Self-regulating. Blow off some steam. Exercise. Play the musical instrument that you love. Don't forget to keep yourself the person that you like. Don't turn into somebody that you don't like. And part of that is self-regulation. And if you can do these little things, I thought this was a good way to balance it out to keep emotional intelligence in check. It's not about all book learning. Knowledge comes from learning, and wisdom comes from living. I thought that was a good one. So, thank you very much. I wish all of you every success. Welcome to the residency program. Stay humble and enjoy your time in medicine.